Welcome to Heresy from the Haven, coming to you from the Gamers Haven, the basement of the Gamers Haven in beautiful Spokane, Washington.
The creaky basement.
Yes, if you can't tell, we're in the basement. We're your hosts. I'm Bob.
I'm Jay.
I'm Jay, and that's Steven.
And we're actually going to finally wrap up the 11th episode for beginners on how a person may want to approach, at least with our opinion, starting Horus Heresy and building your army, building your first faction. It kind of feels nice to be at this point where we kind of put it off, wrap this up, and then we can start talking about the fun stuff after that.
Exactly.
So let's get right to it.
Yeah, now we're going to talk about, you've chosen your faction. Now how do you start building an army list?
Right.
And we are going to bring up some points that we think the player should keep in mind. I'm going to look at my notes, sorry. And all three of us are going to chime in, and we're just going to kind of round robin discussion. And none of us know each other's answers right now, so it'll be an interesting...
I don't know my own answer right now.
That's fair. It'll be an interesting take.
It'll come to you. It'll come to you.
And the first thing we're going to talk about is what is your concept or theme of your army. My approach, being a total newbie to this, was to read a book, fall in love with an army, and kind of just wing it. From that point on, I think the biggest thing for me is I take an approach as I'm pretty sure we all take this similar approach, but I want something that can handle anything I come up against in my army. So I'm going to take this unit to handle this unit to handle this unit to handle.
So it wasn't necessarily a specific theme. It was, I want a Swiss Army knife.
I wanted an answer to everything I might face. However, I guess my theme or concept is going to be, it was basically, I'm Alpha Legion, I'm everywhere, so I'm kind of the more bodies, more better mentality. I tend to play that way with all the games we play. And I don't take a highly elite force. I like a lot of things out that force you to deal with a lot of different...
Roll a lot of dice, and a lot of target.
Yeah.
That plays into you being flexible and having different answers for different things.
For
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
So I think that would be mine. More bodies, more better.
Okay, you, Bob.
Well, I started Horus Heresy with my World Eaters, and I don't think I've really left my World Eaters. I keep saying I'm going to be doing different forces, but it keeps being just World Eaters.
You just sold a different one.
I did. I actually picked up a used Word Bearers army, and I have a buddy getting in, and he loves Word Bearers, and I'm like, take it, make it go away. When I picked my World Eaters, I was all about a very specific moment, a very specific story. And if you've read the books at all, it's the end of the book Betrayer. It's on the planet of Nuceria. So I wanted to have all of the elements and the characters that were in that story. And even to a point where I painted them to make it look like they were in that battle. I have Karn there. I have Eska, the librarian. I have... one of my dreadnoughts are painted up like the first. Why did I just draw a blank on his name? Oh my gosh, Lork the first, right? Right. So, but he's just a normal Contemptor, but he's painted to look like the Warhound Contemptor that was there. That was the pre-World Eaters. But I wanted to build. My theme was based off a specific battle. So my challenge, and we're going to get to that in a minute, was to how to fit that into how I deal with all the different things. But even to a point where I based the whole army in the Red Sands of Nuceria. To make it look like, again, it's that battle. So that was my theme I was going for.
Yeah, awesome. So for me, I'm just going to go ahead and say I currently have 4 Horus Heresy armies.
Right.
And I'll go with the word concept. None of mine are really themed around a certain piece of the lore, a certain piece of the books. I always start with the concept. And what's interesting is I'm sitting here thinking about it. Each of my army's concept is kind of wildly different. In multiple ways you can do this. I'll go through them really quick here. My first army, Salamanders. Its concept was driven by the lore of the Salamanders themselves. I was going to take Meltas and Flamers, get in your face. Pretty simple. I pivoted to Imperial Fist, tank column, armored spearhead. My concept was yellow tanks.
Right.
And that was literally it.
I just want yellow tanks.
I
like yellow.
There's
was
no
your mom's
point.
favorite color.
It's my mom's favorite color,
Right.
then went that
There's
direction.
Right.
The third army I got from Steven, because he didn't like me anymore, with Emperor's Children. That concept was based on a rite of war. We've mentioned previously a rite of war is kind of a rules based in the book, kind of telling you how to build your army. It's kind of, it gives you special rules for certain units and templates, how you build it. And finally, the Runestone Demons list. That full PDF is out, so you can play them now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's pretty limited. You can only really build them one way, just demons running forward. It's just kind of a show. There's multiple different ways you can do this.
I want to play against that with
Yeah.
my world leaders.
Yeah.
Just crash into each other.
Just chop
Right.
the heads off. Got them. Yeah.
And yeah, it's a good point too. When I touch back on my world leaders, I didn't want a lot of range. At this time in this story, the world leaders, it was really their breaking point. And no spoiler what happens at the end of that book, but a very definitive thing happens to Angron, their Primarch, and that's really their breaking point. So I wanted close combat. I wanted as much close combat as I could in one army. I don't have any guns. The only guns are on a couple of tanks I have. Otherwise, it's all axes and bolt pistols, and I never shoot bolt pistols. So.
And the key to defeating world leaders is to not be charged.
No,
by
don't be
world
charged.
leaders.
Yeah, they charge. Then you don't let them charge you. Yeah.
So I guess that kind of goes with the next point we're going to make here, right, Bob?
Yeah. So the next point is how, and this is again a concept you want when you're thinking about building the army. How do you want to play this army? So, for me, with that, now I've got my concept. I've got my Nuceria breaking point of the world leaders army. How is this army going to play? Well, I want it to be all close combat. So now I start looking at the different close combat units that I want to, so it's going to be leaning into the Red Butchers and the Rampagers and Despoilers. These are all units that are primarily close combat. They don't even really have any upgrades for much shooting. And if they do, I don't take them. So this army, and then the Rite of War I chose for this army gives me a bonus. It gives me some limitations that kind of hurt sometimes. Like I can only close charge the closest unit. I can't multi-charge. I can't take allies. But it gives me a distance bonus when I'm actually charging into close combat. So it allows the Rite of War, the whole army concept is, how do I get them across the board as fast as possible? How do I get into close combat as fast as possible? Whether you're better at close combat or not, like playing against Custodes is rough because they just mow me down, but I'm still going to play it the same way. I'm still going to run at my opponent full speed and get into close combat. And it's fun. It's playing that army, that themed army in a specific way, built in such a way that allows me to push that theme as much as I can. And it's been successful. I mean, if I win a game, it's perfect. The matter's not from where the blood flows. If I win a game, I've got 4 or 5 models left on the table, and they have almost nothing left on the table. Like it's just wholesale slaughter. And it's themed. It plays the way I want it to, and now I'm just kind of adding units, taking units out, and doing different variations.
And if you lose, also matters
not from where the blood flows. That's right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, so for me, when it comes to this question, I'll stick with my main army, the Salamanders, my first love when it comes to Heresy. Again, I was really driven, my concept was based on the lore of the Salamanders. If you dive into them again, it's a bunch of flamers, which is flamethrowers, and melt-a-guns, kind of like heat guns, heat lasers almost. But long story short, they only go 12 inches. So the entire army can only shoot 12 inches in front of them. So if I'm just to walk across the board
into a close combat army,
or what we're going to say up top of there is a shooting army, someone who can shoot 48,
right across the table,
I'll just get mowed down.
Right. Or you're going to get one runner shooting at me before I charge you.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So I was talking to Bob way back in the beginning. I was kind of having trouble with Salamanders. I couldn't get across the board. Wasn't having too much fun. And you mentioned
drop pods.
So you may not know, but in the lore, most Space Marines they come flying into a planet. They want to go down and help the populace,
right.
Bring them to the Emperor's goodwill and graces, right? Save them from themselves. They do that by flying down or dropping out of orbit.
Yeah, they either land everything and march into battle, or
giant drop pods. They slam down to the ground. Your troops spill out. I mean, in the game itself, rules-wise, you can get right up turn 1.
Yeah, your units are jumping out 6 inches away from me.
And now my flamers and melters are right up in your face. So I just kind of took that and ran with it ever since.
It's been pretty solid.
Yeah.
Or didn't run with it.
I don't really move, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of just make a wall.
Right.
Yeah.
And it hammers me because I'm sitting there ready to run across the table, and all of a sudden you land in front of me and knock out half my army before I even get a chance to do anything.
Lots of fun.
I guess mine plays differently than that also because
Way different.
Alpha Legion, like a lot of the different legions have really awesome units that are really good at one thing or another, and Alpha Legion's strength is not so much the individual pieces, but the pieces moved around at will. So the rules that Alpha Legion has is where their strength is. So I have all the generic stuff that everybody has. I have nothing that's really super great.
Yeah, their core rules are good, but they're not amazing.
Right. It takes more of a it's more of a battlefield manipulation for me. So you deploy your stuff, I deploy my stuff, and then I redeploy some stuff, and then I infiltrate other things, and then I deep strike some things.
Bring in other factions.
I bring in other factions. I can steal your best stuff and put them into my army. So Alpha Legion doesn't really have a lot of very strong close combat units. So I tend to try and take better close combat units.
And that's not taking something from the game we're playing and putting it yours. You have access to all of my... You can take my Red Butchers as a unit.
Right. I can take your Salamanders. I can take your your World Eaters. I can take Dark Angels. I can take any other faction
they're disguised.
Because they're Alpha Legion.
Right.
So mine plays more as a... Jay does one thing. He drops out of orbit. He surrounds. He makes a wall. Bob runs at people. And I'm like, okay, who am I facing? And how are you going to play? And how do I play to counteract that?
Right.
And where do I put my pieces that's going to best suit my army?
That's really perfect for our next point that we're going to get to in a minute. Is but if I don't want to cut you off, are you finished with that thought? Or?
Yeah, I could go in to that for hours, but
I think the one thing that maybe we missed there, though, in talking about our armies, is the options you have as a player when you're choosing your army. There are so many different ways to deploy on the table. So if you want a fast army that's maybe hitting the ground, you can do drop out assault. There's other options: an outflanking army, an army that's going to be held in reserve and comes in behind your opponent, or a deep striking army that's not using drop pods, that's deep striking in. And one of the things to think about, let's say you're going to lay into an outflanking army. Well, the rest of your army probably isn't an army you want to have sitting back on the backfield shooting, because you're separating your army, right? So if you're going to do something that has a bunch of units that are outflanking, how are you going to have units that are going to move up and support those outflanking armies as well? So when you start getting into the how do you want the army to actually play? Do you want it to be a close combat army? If so, are you just going to run across the table, or are you going to deep strike in an assault, or are you going to outflank? You can't assault out of outflank, but if you're going to outflank and then engage in assault, and then how are you going to build the rest of your forces that aren't using those tactics to support those? So that's something you want to think about when you're building your own army, is how cohesive are these different special rules you may employ to make your army to work the way it wants, what units you're going to use to support each other while you're doing that.
And don't make it so complicated that you confuse yourself, like I have done. When I was trying to learn how to play Alpha.
You can definitely take it as little or as far as you want to, right? You know, my yellow tank army, I chose yellow tanks. They're all tanks. It's not very good. It's not. Right?
There's no special rules that benefit your tank.
No,
your Imperial Fist special rules do not really benefit an armored column, but you win armored column.
But what I did do is, when I did take my tanks, you have many different gun options. Melta, all these different, I was supposed to say this, anti-infantry, anti-tank, anti-flyer options as guns. So then, as I dug into it, the best I could, I tried to make a balanced weapon choices going forward. So it's you can kind of go a little as far as you need to doing that kind of stuff.
It's something important to think about when you're building your army. Is like, how is that army going to function? You know, if it's going to be a Flamer Melta army, you made the choice of drop out assault. I'm doing close combat. I chose a rite of war to make me move faster across the table, because I'm not doing the deep striking or the outflanking or anything else. You have a mixed bag. You can do whatever the heck you want. But if you choose something, if you start, like I really love this idea of a White Scars bike army that's outflanking. Well, you need to have the parts of the army that aren't outflanking you have to pick the units that are going to help support those outflanking units. So you kind of have to keep everything kind of cohesive. And a lot of that comes in play testing. If you're playing against people who are already playing the game, maybe you're even proxying models in, let me try this. Before you start choosing the exact units you want, you may want to kind of play test some of those units. And
Absolutely.
see.
Especially when you're talking about money, time, building, painting. And feel free to ask around, talk to your friends, other people.
Yeah, hit the community. So far, the Horus Heresy community I found on social media has been great.
Yes.
Yeah, like talking about different units. There's always the gatekeepers and the neckbeards. Ignore those assholes.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
So,
and I will say we briefly mentioned allies because Alpha Legion kind of inherently has allies.
That technically wasn't an ally.
It's an army rule.
That's an army rule, and they actually become Alpha Legion. So
still kind of plays into this, though.
it does play into this a little.
So we've mentioned, like, say, Bob, the World Leaders is a close combat army. It's just kind of inherent in their rules. It's how they play. If he really wanted to, you could easily ally in Iron Warriors, sitting on the backside and just lobbing artillery, and you could make a shooting ally to kind of reinforce what you're doing.
So do you choose to take allies or not?
Yeah, so that's kind of a choice you have out there. Is there's allies, and Stephen, you have most of the experience with allies. You want to tell us about your original list? For using
my original list, when I was figuring out, like I mentioned, Alpha Legion doesn't have a lot of close combat. Very good, great close
They're very
combat.
basic. Yeah.
They, like, some of their special rules, again, like their special units have other special rules that make them good. So I decided to... so Alpha Legion first announced themselves to the Dark Angels. Like, hey, we are a Legion.
They were all super secret. Nobody
knew they existed. Right? They showed up at the Rangdan Zenicides. They go, hey, Lion, we are a thing. We're here to help you. For their own reasons. And if you read the books, you'll find it out. But, so I took that concept and I ran with it. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do Alpha Legion and I'm going to ally in close combat Dark Angels.
Right.
And then I'll support them with my Alpha Legion
those units are good.
So I did...
Tyrannic great swords.
I did Assault Marines because Dark Angels have their hexagrammatons.
Hexagrammaton.
Still can't say it.
Can't say it. Been working on it, and yeah. Anyway, we're moving on from that. So they have these hexes. We'll just call them that, and that make them better. So I was like, okay, we'll do Assault Marines. They move fast. They can deep strike. That fits my okay. I can deep strike them if I want. I can move them across the board really quickly.
Yeah, still flexible.
Still flexible, and then. They have a unit called the Inner Circle Knight Cenobium.
The Dark Angels do, yeah.
The Dark Angels do, and they have probably the best melee weapon in the game. And I'm like, that sounds great. Let's put a unit of those in. And I put them in a Charybdis, and I drop that in, and
It's like
then
another drop pod, right?
a big drop pod, and then I assault people out of it.
And that's kind of a 2-for-1. You took the concept of them being allied from the lore, but even gameplay rules wise,
right.
It kind of shored up a weakness Alpha Legion may have. So,
right. So bringing in allies or close combat to assist your Alpha Legion who aren't great at close combat.
Correct.
And when you and I have played, it was a great solution because if you didn't have those there, if I get to you and cut into you, I'm going to start mowing you down. But all of a sudden, I'm hitting a wall of these Knights Zenobia from his Dark Angel allies, and I'm not mowing through those. They're giving.
Shoot!
We have to do an episode just based on that damn game. That was the best. I just anyway. For me, I had mentioned earlier the rite of war I take to make my world leaders move faster across the table. In that rite of wars will always give you some bonuses and some negatives. In that one, actually, I have a negative that I can't take allies at all. If I took a different rite of war, and if I did take allies, what would be, I guess, more competitive to balance what I don't have and I don't want, because my world leaders are all about running across the table into close combat. I don't want a bunch of world leaders with las cannons sitting back there and shooting, because it doesn't make a lot of sense for my theme. But if I was to bring in allies, maybe I do bring in maybe an Iron Warrior, also heretic, force as an ally force, and now it makes sense that they're sitting back laying down heavy firepower while these crazy nutters are running across the table getting to close combat. Or another great one, points efficient, would be like Solar Auxilia.
Oh, for sure.
So I bring in Solar Auxilia, very cheap, some big heavy tanks sitting back there, some heavy weapon teams sitting back there, and they're laying down the firepower for my guys to move forward. So that's, I think, probably, it's interesting because it ties into not only what we've already talked about, concept of theme, or how you want your army to play. Allies can do both of those. Now, and you don't have to be a moron like I am. Like, it's got to be this battle. Well, I like not having allies because, well, they did have word bearers there, but I can't take them because I can't take allies. But I wouldn't have Solar Auxilia there. That's at this battle, it would be all world eaters. But if I wanted to, theme-wise, what I would probably do is find another historic battle that the world eaters were in, where maybe they had Solar Auxilia back up in that battle.
Yeah.
And then try to build a Solar Auxilia force based on what that was. Now I'm hitting my concept, I'm hitting my theme, I'm doing, like, it's helping how I want my army to play, because now maybe you're not so anxious to shoot at the nutters that are flying
Right.
at you because these heavy weapons are laying down firepower and you got to deal with those. And while you're dealing with those, I'm getting closer to you with my close combat. So the allies can really fill a hole in your army, and you can still hit your concept and your theme.
I just figured it out. I'm an ally Imperial Fist yellow tanks with Solar Ox yellow tanks.
Perfect. So you just got to find out
I just
which
came to
Solar
me.
Ox
It just came to me.
has yellow tanks.
Well, okay, you can technically do the Battle of Nicron City with your two armies because you
Yes.
have the Imperial Fists that are under siege from Alpha Legion. You're welcome. And the Salamanders drop in
Literally drop
to
in.
reinforce. So,
Especially in the new book coming out, the Battle of Beta Garmin,
Yeah.
is actually going to introduce that battle and the Shattered Legions.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother
can keep
episode
going,
right
but
there.
yeah.
Yeah. So allies for you. You want to touch on that anymore?
I just did yellow tanks.
Yellow.
No, I think we've mentioned it. It's you can go deep dive on the lore or the story. You can go strictly gameplay to shore up a weakness, or you can just have fun with it. There's no wrong choice. So
Yeah, for sure.
okay, so let's talk about important factors to think about in reference to the actual gameplay.
Right.
So, objectives.
first and foremost,
I'm going to start with this one because that's kind of where when I was learning the game, I'm like, okay, what are objectives? Oh, that's how you score points. Oh, I'm really good at getting on objectives when other people can't.
Through your special.
Through my special
Before
rules,
the game starts.
before the game
You're
starts,
already
I can
there.
be in the
You
middle
snuck
of the
up
board
there, right.
and on objectives and start scoring points. So objectives, in case you haven't figured it out by now, they'll be placed. They could be a building on the board. They could be multiple buildings on the board. They could be tokens that you put down.
Usually it's like 40 millimeter.
It's usually like 40 millimeter
You're within
token
3 inches
somewhere.
of how you score. Right. Only line units though.
Right. You have to have line units within 3 inches of that token, and then at the end of the round, you score points. Or at the end of the game, you score points if you have the most units there, things like that. Objectively speaking, there are units that have a special keyword called line. When you're building your force and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, you need to include a number of line units so that way you can control the objectives. It's not this game is not all about just I'm going to kill your models and you're going to kill my models. That's a fun byproduct of how the game is supposed to be played.
there actually are some missions where you just shoot each other. But at the end of the day, it's like, I want to say 80% of the time, especially narrative events that Bob, you make, it's all about taking and holding certain points on the board. It's kind of a more narrative way to play, a little bit more
Territory
give and
game,
pull.
sure.
If you do have some overpowered army, even the person who's not overpowered, they can play to the objectives.
Sure.
If I can't kill you, maybe I don't have to kill you. I can play to the objectives and still kind of win. At the end of the day, it's still you want to win or lose, right? So when you're building your list, we talk about point levels: 1,000 point, 2,000 point, 3,000 point. You want to make sure you have a fair number of line units that can hold objectives. Personally, I try to always include one for each 1,000 points, and then plus one if I can, at the very least. But the more the merrier, honestly, when it comes to
I
line
say
units.
that's kind of my rule of thumb too. That
Yeah.
when I'm building a list, it's 1 per 1,000, and then if I can include an extra, it'd be great.
Yeah, what about you, Bob?
You guys are adorable. What are objectives?
You have one objective.
I have one objective. So to play to that, it's very difficult to sit on an objective and score
And then go.
when I don't have guns to shoot. So that objective you're sitting on over there, I'm going to smash into that with my line unit and try to wipe it out so I'm holding it.
Right.
I do carry, when I build a list, I usually will bring, like I've got one 10-man tactical squad, bare bones, with, I call them my lawn chair unit. And
Yep.
they are going to sit back at an objective maybe. So objectives are placed throughout the table. And there's usually one close or near or in your deployment zone. And then some in the middle, some in your opponents. And I'll drop that one cheap tactical squad on that unit, on that objective, and they're just going to sit back there the whole time. So I call them a lawn chair. They're just sitting in lawn chairs the whole time, just like hanging out, right? Because hopefully, especially if you don't have deep strike or outflank or another way to basically leapfrog over my wall of nutters coming at you, they're just going to sit there and score every turn. But it's really hard for me to hold other objectives across the table because, again, I'm not I do have line units, my despoiler line units, my actually I think that's it. I think I usually run two, my tactical line squad. And
Well, I think this is a good point to bring on the next part, the secondary objectives.
Sure. So secondary objectives are, if almost every game will have probably the same 5, either all 5 or in any combination thereof. You have Slay the Warlord. You get an extra bonus point at the end of the game if you kill your enemy's Warlord. They're one HQ model that is determined before the game. This is the leader of my army. You get one for, there can be attrition. You killed more units than your opponent has.
World Eater, okay.
Right. And you've got what is the one where if you bring a Primarch or a super heavy, price of failure.
Price of failure.
Price of failure. So if somebody has brought a super heavy vehicle or a knight or a titan or a Primarch and you kill that, you get points. I think Primarchs were 2 points.
Yeah, World Eater. Okay.
Breakthrough, getting through it and having more units in your opponent's deployment zone. So going forward, breaking through.
World Eater.
Right. So I guess I can see where you're going with this. And what's the other one? I can't remember what the other one is right now. But anyway, there's these secondary objectives. So the primary
Probably not a World Eater.
That's why I don't remember. Right? So, but be honest with you, I don't even know when I'm playing a game. At the end of the game, I'm like,
then you just count.
Okay, let's count. I don't even know what's happened. I punched a bunch of things. I smashed things with axes. Then you have a big dead pile, and I have a big dead pile. Let's figure it out. But yeah, the most primary are, there's really only 2 basic primary missions, and that is who's killed more things or who's held more objectives. I personally don't like, weird enough, the who's killed more things, because it ends up potentially favoring somebody really well.
Right.
You know, let's say you don't have a ton of firepower, and I'm coming across the table at you. There's no reason for you to come out. There's no reason for me to stay, and you really can't handle my charge. Or vice versa. Let's say I don't have a ton of firepower and you have a whole gun line. And now we're just going to get into this gunfighting match, and whoever has the bigger guns is going to win. I like objective games. Even though I'm not great at playing objective games with my world leaders, it makes people have to move. It makes people have to be... It's
much more dynamic.
Very dynamic, absolutely. But those are the 2 primaries. On most missions out of the books you're going to find, and then the secondaries, those ones we mentioned, are usually attached. And those are usually worth 1 point each at the end of the game. So you could score an objective 3 turns in a row and get 3 points, but you're still only getting 1 for Slay the Warlord.
So definitely keep those in mind when you're building your list.
Yeah. So you want units that can hold objectives, and how are you going to potentially go after the secondaries?
And I think the third main thing we want to talk about when it comes to building your list. I mean, specifically, we have to talk about your legion, your army specific rules.
Right.
Which you've already chosen at this point.
Yeah. So if I've chosen, I'll go to my Imperial Fists. They're very simple. Their main legion rule is +1 to hit with all weapons that are labeled as bolt or auto.
Right. And if you're very new to this, Space Marine bolt weapons, and we're primarily talking about just legions. We're not talking about some of the other armies, but this is their rank and file rifle. Is a bolt rifle. It's a bolter, and they have the pistol is a smaller version. Heavy bolter is a larger version.
Yeah. So the +1 to hit means I shoot better. So when I'm building my army list, I can certainly take the other special weapons, but I lose out on my army rule. Mm-hmm. It's pretty simple when it comes down to it. Just keep your army rule in mind. You don't necessarily have to go all in, but little things to think about, like world leaders. I think it's
because my right of war. Oh, my world leaders in the game rules, each
also
model
simple.
has a basic attack stat.
Yep.
Let's say my rampagers have 2 attacks each. When anybody in the game charges, you get +1 attack. So if I'm the one who initiated the charge, it's supposed to represent me ramming into you, I get an additional dice. So if I got 10 guys, I went from 20 attacks to 30 attacks. Well, world leaders, when they attack, they get an extra, when they charge, they get an extra attack.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen those fingers. So I've got 2 attacks, charge over attack.
So I like to talk to my opponent, right? So they know exactly what I'm doing. I'll usually mark it with dice too. So yeah, so my building into my gameplay is I want to initiate the charge, and that's the kind of the worldwide joke is you want to beat world leaders, don't let them charge you. You want to lose, let them charge you.
Yeah, but you have to charge the closest unit.
I do, and that's a big negative. So you can shove a tank in my face that I don't want to charge, and I have to charge that tank because it's the closest unit instead of that unit I want to charge. So that really works into my strategies. But yeah, when building an army and I'm picking units, I want units that are going to be able to get there fast and initiate the charge. I don't want you to be able to charge me. I don't want you to take away from my charge. So
maybe we should talk about the types of units you'll encounter.
That's a great idea.
It's almost like
that's a great segue.
Right? You want to start with that?
No, you were going right in.
All right.
You're doing a great job.
So
I just wanted to make the audience aware.
I like that. It was a great segue. So when you're picking your army, there's things to think about. Like so, myself, I put myself into this little kind of container where I'm only taking close combat units. Okay, well, what if I'm fighting his tank army? What if I'm fighting against? Maybe all of my guys have weapons that are only good against normal armor, and I'm facing an army that has a whole bunch of the better Terminator armor. How am I going to deal with that? And I think it's important, kind of with your Swiss Army knife concept we were talking about earlier, that when you're building your list, you don't have to have every unit be able to handle tanks and hordes or light infantry and heavy infantry, but you should have components in your army that can handle those things. So in my case, how do I deal with tanks? Well, I usually include 1 or 2 close combat weapons that are a higher strength weapon. So when I get into combat with that tank, my regular axes maybe aren't hurting it, but my big weapons
at least have a chance.
Can punch a hole through it.
And by this point, you probably know that depending on the unit you choose, there's different weapon profile options that you can choose to put into each individual.
They come with
which is what we're talking.
This, but you can 1 guy in 5 can take this, right? You can take a bigger weapon.
Different point levels. This is as you're building your list. You're really calculating up.
Mm-hmm. How do I squeeze in that Thunderhammer? Or that
might have to drop something here to add something here.
Sure.
Which is the, I mean, that's a great way to do it. Because I can move my guys, I chose to do, I have a unit to handle this, I have a unit to handle this, I have a unit to handle this, and I can manipulate the board. Whereas you don't have that option, so you're like, I have this unit, and it can handle this, this, or this.
Right.
And I have this unit that can handle this, this, or this. And since you're running across the board, I want to actually illustrate this. So as he's running across the board trying to get to you, he's looking at what you have, and when you shoot a squad and kill his guys, he's taking out the least effective model against what he's going to be attacking.
Right. So that's where I get to choose the casualties. It also starts even at deployment. Like when I'm looking across the table, I'm like, I only have a couple units that can deal with that. So I'm going to deploy these here so they can get behind this building and then get behind this and then finally get to that. So but I think before we get too deep into the weeds there, I think it's an important thing to keep in mind now that you've worked out your theme, you've worked out all your different concepts of how you're building your army, whether you're taking allies or not. Now start thinking about how am I going to deal with all Terminator squads? How am I going to deal with dreadnoughts? How am I going to deal with Primarchs? How am I going to deal with Horde infantry? How am I going to deal with these different things? And you can't possibly have something for everything, but it is important. Like if your whole army can only deal with light infantry, you're in trouble. If you end up with at an event and you end up against somebody who has all heavy infantry, you're not going to have an easy time dealing with that. So you should kind of build into the list, or you don't have to by any means. If you want to go pure fluff, go pure fluff. But building into your list the tools to deal with the different types of things you can face, I think
you're just going to have a better play experience. You know, at the end of the day, you're building a super fluffy lore-based list. Mm-hmm. But as you're building it, you're still keeping these things in mind because you want to be able to play the game. Mm-hmm. You want to be able to play. Not just show up and just start taking models off because all you have is bolt guns and bolt pistols.
Right.
So keep it in mind, no matter how far to either spectrum you want to go with this.
I mean, unless you choose the horde route, where, yes, you do show up and you're just taking the guys off with bolt guns because you've brought 240 of them.
Infantry.
Which may or may not be a list I'm building right now.
Right.
Yes.
So yeah, but I think it's important. Like I said, it's an important concept if you're building your first army to try to keep in mind a lot of these different aspects.
Yes. So I'm going to go. My personal choice is I usually try to go for flexibility, and I'm a nerd, so I kind of go deep into the rules and what things do. So I like to choose weapons or loadouts that can kind of not necessarily be the best choice on either end of the spectrum, infantry or tank, but they're flexible. You can kind of go up or you can kind of go down. Mm-hmm. So as you're playing the game, you can react based on what your units have, and you're not kind of shoehorned into something like last cans you talked about. If your opponent brings no armor, those last cans aren't that great.
Right.
If I were to put, excuse me, I'm gonna stop saying put. If I have 200 guys, and you have a 10-man las cannon, that means I run.
I just killed 5% of them. Right? If I'm lucky.
You kill 10 of my guys.
Right.
If you hit all of them,
right.
And then the other 10 guys run. So it's, weapons can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
That comes from experience.
We're all nerds.
That's fair.
So
that customer experience, again, we talk to people. If you're brand new, I mean, there's so many options. And we hate to have you guys, glue something with super glue, glue it all together. Turns out you don't like it. So talk to people around, play some games, leave the arms off, play a couple games.
Proxy guys in
Yeah.
here. I've seen people put little notes on their models
Yeah.
representing this. I love walking up to a game, and because I own the game store here, and I'll walk up and I'll look at a table, and I'm like, so I'll see, hey, you have this army. And I look over and I'm like, I see Age of Sigmar models, I see 40K models, I see Horus Heresy models, I see Star Wars models. What the hell is going on over here? There I go. I'm proxying this army. I'm not sure how I want to build it. This is actually this unit. This is this unit. Sure. It's not something you're going to take to an event or take to a tournament. Make sure you have your opponents, okay with proxying units like that ahead of time. But it's a great way to play test some units before you choose which ones you want to do.
Yeah. No wrong way to skin a cat, though.
Or is every way wrong to skin a cat?
Touche.
Well, you guys want to touch on that anymore? I think we covered kind of your basic concepts of what you want
I
to
think that's
about.
enough to confuse them for now.
Yeah, I think maybe in the future we'll do maybe our own personal army deep dives.
Yeah.
So we
Or
kind
do
of
shorts.
Yeah.
We were talking about doing some
we
shorts.
could do a 3-minute deep dive.
3-minute deep dive. Okay.
I
3-minute deep dive.
do
Here we
anything
go.
for 3
We'll put it on the
minutes.
TikTok. We'll put it on the instant.
We'll put it on the
Grams.
YouTubes.
Hey, we can mail them out. If you send us your address,
We will mail
Carrier
you
pigeon?
little.
we will burn it.
We'll burn you CDs. We won't burn you CDs.
Before we say goodbye, if you may have noticed, if you're a veteran, you may have noticed some pretty cool pieces sitting around us right now. I'll first say that I'm hosting in May 18th and 19th, a large event here in Spokane Community College, and it's going to be a large 40K tournament that is, I got 2 tickets up for the U.S. Open. This is a qualifier event for the U.S. Open. The only way to go to the U.S. Open Championships in November in Atlanta, I think,
I believe
is
so.
by winning one of these tickets, and we'll have 2 tickets up for that. We're also doing an Age of Sigmar. This is a 2-day event, big Age of Sigmar event, but we're also doing a large narrative Horus Heresy event. So I've got a ton of work to do for that. Well, in between, an opportunity popped up. About 15 plus years ago, Games Workshop had made a table called a Realm of Battle table that was 4 or 6 2-foot square plastic table pieces that would all link together, and there were 4 corner hills that you could rotate those around and have one big plateau in the center. And I had 2 of these old Realm of Battle tables, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to turn these into some narrative Horus Heresy tables. So awesome guys I met up in Victoria at the Alex Pappas Memorial event. One of them had won one of the Forge World tiles. Forge World made a tile that sits in between this one right here that fits into that Realm of Battle table. I'm like, oh, perfect. I'm gonna make this new narrative table. I'll have it merges with the hills perfectly. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I have 2 of these tables. I'm gonna go find the Crash Thunderhawk, which is one of the most coveted ones.
Holy grail.
I've seen 3 in my life. Forge World only made these for a short amount of time. They're really hard to find. So I started searching for one of these, and I found one. The guy that I was interacting with wasn't one of the most pleasant gentlemen I've dealt with. But in the process of this, one of my customers pointed out a post on a U.S.-Canada buy-sell trade group on Facebook that had all of them. And he happened to be in Portland. And we're in Spokane. It's not that far away. So I made a deal with the guy, and we now have a complete set of the Forge World ties. He also had tiles. He also had 2 more Realm of Battle tables. So, I'm sorry, he was missing one. There's a gun emplacement one I don't have, so now, of course, I'm a completionist. I got to find that one.
Yeah.
So I decided, well, in 2 months, I'm running this massive event that I still have to do all this. You know what? Next month, we should have a mega battle. So we have, if you do the quick math on that, 4 Realm of Battle tables. That is 24 2x2 tiles, and now 6, a Space Marine base, a landing pad, a large generator, another large generator, a Thunderhawk, and a bunker built into the side of a hill. Well, that's 6 plus 24 is 30. On Saturday, I'm taking all these Realm of Battles and all these to my house in my garage, painting all of them base coats. For 30 tables, we're building a 6-foot across by 20-foot long
This is massive.
table out of these 6 Realm of Battles and these 6 panels. and we're running a mega battle. We're shooting for 10 on 10, but I think we're at about 6 on 6 right
We
now.
are currently at 6 on 6.
5,000 points each
per person.
per person.
So, and then right now, based estimates.
And then we balance Titans.
So we balance Titans. So we're currently around 45,000 points per side.
In the loyalist group, which you guys are not in.
Why would we be?
Why?
We might be.
Well, but we
I'm in both groups.
I think we're rough estimate is almost. I think we're up to like 20 Titans.
Jake told me today that you are at 15,175.
So how we're doing it with the, if we end up with just 6 players, each player taking 5,000 points. Primarch's optional. Really being loose with course organization chart.
Yeah.
I think at 5,000 points, I have an extra HQ and an extra troop choice.
Rule of cool wins.
Rule of cool wins.
Yeah.
When we play these big games, generally what we do is if someone gets hit too hard, we recycle. We just bring it back on the table. I'm renting out a gymnasium across the street from my shop. So we have a gymnasium all day Saturday, all day Sunday, April 20th and 21st. We will be doing a lot of video of this. And we balance Titans. So Titans aren't part of it.
Right.
So if you have a Warlord, we have a Warlord. If you have a Reaver, you have a Reaver.
Or 7.
And I know I have a Warlord and a Reaver, but I think we're looking at, what'd you say, about 15 Titans per side?
Per side.
15,000 points worth of Titans per side.
But we're at least 10 to 15 per side of Titans.
Yeah.
It's going to be a blast. Because I needed more to do before the Inland Northwest Open. I needed to put together a
Of
mega
course.
battle.
We appreciate you, Bob. We do.
You know how you could appreciate me? You could appreciate me with a paintbrush.
My wrist is sore.
I'm pretty sure you have a bunch of them upstairs.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. So anyway, look, we'll keep you updated on these tiles and the progress on making them. I also decided to paint all the Legion Imperialis tiles. Oh, that was the other thing.
Yeah.
The guy had 4 Titanicus tiles as well that Forge World made, and I've got a bunch of the Legions Imperialis tiles, and I'm painting all of that to match. So we're actually going to have a giant Legions Imperialis mega battle on the same day because I'm a glutton for punishment.
You are.
I'm going to get all this painted. So keep your eyes open. We'll show some content on those.
It'll be grand.
Yeah, take us out, somebody. Not me.
If you want to join us on this journey, like, follow, subscribe. Our
Peer
first
pressure.
series will try to address the new to Horus Heresy player and how to go about picking your faction, including some
just did that.
aspects that may or may
You
not
may be
fit
reading
around.
old text there. so-
I'm just reading what you put in front of me. Anyway,
And we just concluded our first series.
yes, this
We
is
did.
This is it.
Yeah.
this is it. We're done. We're gonna start doing some of the fun
Oh,
stuff.
we're done?
No, we're not.
we're
done.
Oh.
Now we're gonna. Yeah, look, we were actually talking about the next episode, maybe kind of doing what we just talked about in this episode. But if we do it a 45-minute episode, he spends 15 minutes on his army. We'll have it set out. I spend 15 minutes on my army. It's set out. Then 15 minutes on your army set out on how kind of a deeper dive into what we did with our army and why we picked the units we did and how they applied to all the things we talked about. And then after that, man, I want to talk about
Top
a lot of
fives.
stuff.
We can do some of
I want
those.
to talk about how effed up the last FAQ was that you can't deep strike or you can't outflank or deep strike with an assault vehicle and assault out of it.
I thought it was great.
It's almost like
FAQ says yes in one spot and no in another. They're idiots.
No, I'm
Anyway,
just saying only the drop pod assault. can do it, so.
thanks everybody.
and that's where we stop talking.
I won't copy paste that anymore.
I don't know if it matters or not, but that guy looks like he's painting right here.